But the amount of times we don't know why we do things the way we do, you need to be inquisitive and curious and ask and understand, because in knowledge, there's power, and truth will set you free. I definitely believe in that adage.
Step into the world of success with Your Brand Amplified, the ultimate podcast designed to unravel the intricacies of thriving businesses. I'm your host, Annika Jackson, and I'm on a mission to uncover the stories, strategies, and secrets that have propelled entrepreneurs and business leaders to success. I'm laughing because I just said to Elizabeth Bieniek that this is going to be a conversation as if we've never had a conversation. But right before we jumped on, we were talking about our last podcast interview for another podcast, and we were talking about Villanova professor that I introduced her to. So it's a little hard to do that, but thank you for being, Elizabeth, on Your Brand Amplified and sharing your wisdom and experience and insights.
Thank you. I'm very excited for this conversation.
Yes, me too. So to introduce yourself to the Your Brand Amplified audience, you are a tech pioneer. You are I love the phrasing of this, human-centric AI consultant and believer. You are an author, a keynote speaker, a podcast host, and you are also one of the most influential female pioneers in technology. So you're just so inspirational, and I'm really excited to dive into this conversation.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited too. Let's go.
So let's give a little background to your Brand Amplified audience on how you got into tech and became a tech pioneer.
Kind of by accident, I have to say. Yeah, we all had these ideas when we were kids, like when I grow up, I want to be this. And very rarely does that turn out. I did not have my sights set on being in the tech space at all whatsoever. So I say that somewhat jokingly, but it kind of was by accident. It was a very interesting route. I was pursuing I actually thought I was going to go into writing. I had an English degree in undergrad, was very close to getting my MFA in fine arts, and kind of made a hard pivot into business and pursued my MBA instead. Really fell in love with the business world. And it was just looking for an opportunity after my MBA. I ended up talking to a lot of people in the tech space. My husband and I had made a life move to Silicon Valley, the mecca of tech in the US. And I met so many people in the technology space. And I still reflect back on this one conversation. I was speaking with someone who was from my alma mater. And he was saying, why don't you apply here? And I just kind of laughed. I'm like, I'm not a tech person. And he corrected me that, there's a lot more in tech than engineers. There's a lot of other facets that make the tech world run. And one thing led to another. I ended up, through a connection of his, I ended up getting an opportunity to move into a large tech corporation, Cisco at the time. And once inside, saw a whole new world and started realizing that, hey, tech is like any other space. It has its problems, has its challenges. It's got real people. It's got good people. It's got bad people, all the things. So once in the door, they let me loose.
I do think those things go hand in hand, creativity and tech. There's so many people I know who are AI, have AI patents and are tech founders who also play multiple musical instruments, are involved in film production, and use this other side of their brain, write books, think about things from a creative aspect. And I that probably served you better than a lot of people.
Well, I think any field, honestly, just being well-rounded, being a well-rounded human and using both sides of the brain. Yes, I've met some incredible people in the tech space who had very, what you'd say, non-techie hobbies and that they were very successful at. And I do think I had maybe a different appreciation. My husband is a recovering software engineer, and he used to define, he's like, software, it's like writing in another language. It's just like writing. And he has this weird fascination with grammar. And despite the fact that my background is English and writing, he is much better at grammar than I, like knowing the actual rules of it because he pays attention to it. I'm more like a trained by ear type of person. But he really looks at the synergies between the language in writing code and the language of writing anything else. And there is a lot of artistry and creativity that goes into that.
Yeah, that's true. And of course, now we've reached the days where you don't have to think about code as much. You can just use LLMs to write it.
Well, I would argue that point. You have to still.
And of course, I'd love to hear your point of view because that is what a lot of people say And I think it's funny because it's probably the more technical people who know how to write code who are saying this versus people who come at it from a different perspective. I haven't considered myself a very technical person either, but a lot of AI founders that I talk to now think that I am, I should be in this space. And I am testing out and learning and trying to use my creativity to innovate and figure out new ways to work on solutions. Just this past couple of weeks, I've been working on agentic AI and how that can help me vet all of my podcast guests better. And then I'm like, oh, and then I can use this to reverse engineer some things. And so I have all these ideas. And my goal is in the next 10 weeks to have 4 or 5 different workflows taken over by this.
Yeah.
So so talk about coding and why,
Yeah, I think at the very high level, thinking of AI like a tool, the way that you're using it right now. Like I have a process, I have something I'm trying to do. How can I use this tool to become more efficient at that and do that in less amount of time, less pain? And I think that is an excellent application. That makes a ton of sense. I think we're starting to see the challenge of people trying to outsource the thinking process to AI. And you can't do that. I just reshared something on LinkedIn that God, I don't know his name, but he had made this whole wonderful explanation about where we are in the AI curve and how AI is it's getting rid of the less talented, I guess you would say. It's kind of like the crude way of saying it. It's like you can't hide with AI because people that were kind of getting away with before just, I just kind of stitch these things together or I pull all these things together, but I'm not really adding a new creative value to it. Those are the jobs that will be going away because AI is much more efficient at finding all those things and pulling things together and coming up with synergies between them and saying, oh, I'll put it together in this combination. And that's great because that can become just grunt work. I mean, that is something that makes a lot of sense to outsource. But you're saying through this process, what you end up seeing is eventually the people with the real strategic thinking and the creativity, like this is not going to replace you. It's just going to give you more venues to shine because that is something that's really hard to create. I think we tend to just kind of forget that AI is based on training models, which are input by people, which are fallible. And there's limitations to what is in there. I wrote an article about, does AI have a baking bias? Because I wanted to I was doing this whole article about, flow and when you're in flow, how you can be so much more productive than when you're out of flow. And I'm somebody that I think after 30 years of work experience, I've realized when I'm in flow and when I'm out. And it's just, I don't fight the system anymore as much as possible. I try to just work with what I can. But I was writing this article about kind of trying to approach this one thing. And I was trying to do this one, write a piece. And I just kept getting stuck. And I was going to title it something about sometimes I just want to bake muffins. And I needed to take a afternoon and just do something totally different. Again, different part of the brain so that I could kind of work through that. And then I could come back to it and be much more refreshed to do it. But I use AI for image generation a lot. I went to go with my articles and I was trying to get something about baking. I put in several prompts and I wouldn't say I'm the best in the world at AI prompts, but I'm good enough that I can usually in a couple of tries, I can get what I want. I kept going round and round and round. And I was getting the weirdest things. It was like trying to get a vision of just like, a messy kitchen counter in the middle of baking or putting something in the oven. And it was these things like there were trays of muffins that were levitating. There was like a woman reaching over, pulling something out of the oven with just her bare hands, a hot metal, that cracked eggs on the counter were hard-boiled eggs. I mean, it was just all this. And I'm realizing, so I ended up switching gears and I'm writing an article about, this AI have a baking bias. So if you think about the training data that's being sourced, it's probably not a lot on cooking. And probably not a lot on just normal kitchen behavior and that kind of know-how is not going into it because that's not what we focused on in these training models. And so it's interesting. You end up seeing these cracks in the system and you realize, wow, in some ways, yes, you can get fantastic input from AI. In other areas, it's kind of like a little kid, doesn't know anything about it. So it's just taking it all with a grain of salt.
Yeah. Yeah, very true. I will say that Claude helped me diagnose what exactly was wrong with my laptop better than Apple support.
There you go.
And it was a technical thing, right? So I was like, screenshots and, okay, let's go into this and let's go to this system and what are the numbers? And so we were able to say, okay, these 3 things are wrong with the laptop and you just have to get a new one. That's
Yeah.
been one of my big hiccups this week, but luckily I'm still able to do Riverside, knock on wood, while I'm getting my new one set up. But yeah, so it's good at technical things that it doesn't have to be creative and thinking through. And it's good at when you input a lot of your own data and create your own knowledge base and being able to have it write in your voice or share ideas. That would be something that you would write, right? And as a back and
Yeah.
forth, not just as a replacement tool.
Yeah, it's amazing for going through huge data sets and probably the most efficient tool we could possibly imagine to go through these huge data sets. And the potential there is phenomenal. But putting the wisdom behind what data is useful in what scenarios and why, that's a much harder thing to train on than looking for patterns or looking for, relationships and long-term trends. So it's an amazing tool in the way that we can use it. But I think the people that are like, AI is coming for our jobs and no, it's AI overlords are going to take over, are like, it has limitations, and let's be mindful of what it's good for and what it's not good for. And we can't just chuck everything over to AI and assume it's going to solve all of our problems.
Yeah. Well, I do want to talk about your background and how you became a female pioneer in technology. But before we get to that, I want to talk a little bit more about what you just said. So there are jobs that we know can be replaced. For instance, most people still who have farms need farm workers. But we've also been able to see that with computer vision, we can have a machine go through and pick apples and be able to tell, is this a good apple? Is this a rotten apple? Is this ready to be picked or not? And sort them better, which, as humans, we might not do. And of course, with everything going on right now in the United States and some workers being deported and some being here, I think that some of these AI functions will become more and more important, such as that use case. But then does turn into a situation of, well, if somebody is not as skilled, they haven't necessarily gotten an education or even a certification in something, how do we help them have jobs of the future and make sure that they're getting the support they need? So I know that's
Yeah.
kind of a big question, but it's something that I'm thinking about a lot.
Well, for every time we're taking jobs away, we're creating new ones. I mean, yes, certain things will go away because we now have other ways to. I mean, you're starting to talk about like the intersection of AI and robotics. Of, do I have a mechanical arm that is now picking the apples or something? And there is a lot of potential there for sure for us to replace human labor with machine labor. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Back to the whole, what skills then does somebody have? Well, we're going to need an incredible amount of workforce that's going to be maintaining and updating and servicing all of this, the machines that we're creating, the server rooms that we're creating. There's a ton of work to be done that we are creating net new that didn't exist before. And we've seen this again and again. Every time look at there was a technical revolution or industrial revolution, there has been a change in the type of work that we do. It didn't go away, but we have yet to achieve that state in society where people are just floating around like in the cartoon Wall-E with nothing to do. We're not there yet. There's still a lot of work to be done. It will change, absolutely. But that's okay. I mean, technology always is changing. Civilization is always changing. Skill sets are always changing, and we will adapt and move forward with it. I think that the farming one is an interesting use case. Rabbit trail for a minute. I'm actually interested more in not so much the output of, like picking that kind of thing, replacing that type of work, but the input. I was reading some really interesting stuff about using AI again to take large samples of data and draw conclusions out of it. Things like soil health and water levels and looking at more sustainable farming practices. We have a wealth of knowledge, we have a wealth of information, I should say. Can we pull knowledge out of that? And I think using AI in that form is really, really interesting, because if you look at the agricultural scene across the global world right now, it's a little scary, actually. Our ability to create and generate food in a way that we have historically for generations and generations, we are losing that ability, and people are by choice choosing not to go in that profession. And there's a variety of factors in there, and we don't need to get into all those today. But looking at, can we use technology to make those practices more efficient? I think there's incredible potential there, because it's using AI at its most poignant, of taking huge amounts of information and then putting them together and trying to pull conclusions out of that, of how can we be more efficient in this going forward.
Oh, the rabbit holes I want to go down right
I
now.
know there's so many things.
I was thinking about
We have 8 hours for this podcast, right?
Yeah, that was leading me to think back about to like the 50s and 60s when we had Tang and all these different things that were taken through the labs that weren't necessarily healthy or good for us.
Mm.
But this is a completely different use case in the way that we can use AI for good.
Yeah.
The humans still overseeing everything, but to help with things that we frankly need a lot of help with right now. There's industries where people aren't really going into them. They're not looked at as industries that will help people even have a great livelihood.
And helping people in the exceptions, in the fringes. Like if you look at the bell curve, like most drugs are manufactured for at the top of the bell curve. So a lot of people with this condition, we can make a lot of money doing this, so we're going to treat this. The people that are on the edges of that bell curve, there's simply not the motivation to do that, which it's logical. I mean, it makes sense, but it's very unfortunate if you are on the fringes of that bell curve. There's a lot of really interesting AI medical applications. I posted something about this in LinkedIn a while ago about this one, like his name, because I'm terrible with names. This one individual, he was a doctor who he ended up doing it for his own health situation. He ended up being diagnosed with something that was basically like, oh, that stinks for you. That's unfortunate. And giving no hope, but he was in the medical profession. He's like, I don't accept that answer. There has to be something. So he started using AI early on to comb through what are all the side effects of known medications out there? And could one of those things we classify as a side effect actually help me basically end up saving his own life? And now has gone on to create this organization that is doing exactly that, saying, we're not asking drug manufacturers to make something net new for this really fringe thing that they simply won't recoup the cost for research. We're simply saying, can we repurpose existing drugs that we've already made? We already know the known side effects. And could some of those things that we've classified as side effects actually be life-saving for other people? Yeah. So that's a fantastic use case for AI.
That's really beautiful. Yeah. So let's talk about coming up in tech and becoming this pioneer and figuring out how to use your creativity with technical side to solve problems for people.
So thank you to TopTal for making that very flattering top 10 female pioneers in tech. Every time I see that, I'm like, wait, did you mean me? That came from specifically, I spent a lot of time working in the augmented reality and spatial computing space. And going back probably like 10 years ago now, starting in that area when it was still very up and coming. And there weren't a lot of people out there vocally pushing the envelope on what could be done. There weren't a lot of women out there vocally pushing the envelope on what could be done. That has changed. There's a lot of amazing women in that field. But having a opportunity to lead in that space is what led to a lot of this lovely publicity in that. But the background there is I spent quite a bit of my career at Cisco and working within WebEx and the future of enterprise collaboration. And a lot of that started from more of a strategic standpoint of where is this industry going and what has the potential to be very disruptive in this space. And that's what led me focusing more on the area of spatial computing and looking at what could augmented virtual reality do in this space. And it was a rabbit trail. It was a many-year rabbit trail that one thing led to another, research to, what about this? And we could do that. And ultimately led to forming a tiger team to explore this inside of the company and then building out an internal startup and then running it like a founder inside of a large tech corporation, which I did for many years. And that ultimately ended up being WebEx Hologram, which is an end-to-end holographic collaboration system. It's a way to interact with somebody on the other side of the world, but have the awareness of everything being multidimensional. So the same way that we communicate with other people, when I'm trying to explain something to you, it's so much easier to pick something up and show you and say, well, this piece goes inside that piece and you move this around there. And there's so many spatial elements of that you lose in a 2D interaction on a screen. So if you're trying to co-create or train somebody on a new piece of equipment, having that multidimensionality is really useful. So that's kind of the story that led to that.
Yeah. So it sounds so space age, but the reality is that it is here because I automatically think about Star Wars.
Right? Oh, well, 100%. Well, then you're thinking in the right direction because all of my original pitch decks had the Jedi Council on there. Like, we want to build this.
And that clicks me to one thing we're talking about a lot in K through 12 education right now, particularly for a school that I work at ICL, middle school and high school kids, and how do we incorporate AR and VR into learning? We're starting to incorporate a lot more AI so that students can really learn from what they're passionate about and customize the curriculum and personalize it. But we also want to bring in those experiences where they could go into, I don't know, 1000 BC, Alexandria in Egypt and like, do really experience things. And I mean, yes, there are some technologies that do that, but do you think that there is a play to create a bigger system for that? And would you be at the forefront of that? Or are you?
Well, so it's interesting. I have very conflicting thoughts when it comes to kids. There's been, specifically around augmented virtual reality, there's been a lot of research on how that impacts developing eyes and developing brains. And if you actually read the fine print on a lot of AR VR headsets, well, at least back in the space time when I was working in the space, I have not checked in the last few years, but they all came with a warning of not to be used by anyone under 14. And that is because of how your body is developing and how your sight is developing and how you are reacting to the inputs that you're putting into your eyes and your brain. So I would say I am much more of a proceed with caution kind of person in that space. Now, that being said, once you're getting into the teen years, for sure, the ability to create an immersive experience that would otherwise be unattainable, there is incredible potential that you're saying, like, going to a tour of something. Now, not only touring something historic that maybe doesn't exist anymore, but also think about the amount of people that don't have the opportunity to travel. Travel is very expensive, and everything post-COVID, there are a lot more restrictions and challenges with that. How cool to be able to get some life and world experience if that otherwise would not be afforded to you. So I think there's a lot of potential we haven't yet looked into on that regard. The other thing I think is really interesting and unique, and this works really well, and one of the first use cases that I was familiar of with back in the day for VR, no, actually AR, I'm sorry, augmented reality, was around training autistic children to more comfortably handle social situations. Because you are able to create any type of scenario, you're able to go at any pace, and it really allowed the sort of like baby stepping into different social scenarios so that you could get more comfortable with it and familiar with it. It's also used a lot for augmented reality. We use a lot for PTSD training, for recovery from PTSD for veterans, because again, if you have a PTSD is something that you're struggling with, you're not going to put on a VR headset that's going to block out the world around you. Like, that comes with its own phobias and fears. And if you are completely immersed in a scenario that's going to be a trigger for you, that's not going to work. It's going to shut you down. But if you're using an augmented reality scenario, we can kind of replay that scenario, but overlay it over your living room, your home office, the therapist's room. It allows you that sort of different way to approach it mentally of, yes, I am seeing that and reliving that, but I am safe here in this environment, and now I can address it without immediately shutting it down because it was a trade. So, like, looking at some of these therapies and training, it's incredible what could be done. And I think we've barely scratched the surface.
Wow. Yeah. And that's, I have a love-hate relationship with the concept, because Fahrenheit 451 was one of my favorite books growing up. And so the idea of people just coming in and immediately talking to walls and losing socialization and losing actual human connection. But on the other hand, I know that since the pandemic, my eyesight has definitely had a lot more strain from being on screens all day. And so I do love the idea of just being able to like pull up something from the air and like work on things in a bigger way than just typing away on a laptop.
Well, that new health phenomenon that came up when people were working on laptops and phones all the time of tech neck. The whole thing of like,
yeah.
Yeah, you can alleviate some of that if you could actually be heads up.
So obviously you had to bring a lot of innovation into Cisco to innovate, create, work on new products. And now that's something that you're really, that you've continued to be passionate about. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that, what you do today, your book, and how you're approaching that in the field.
So it started with the project I was mentioning before of building something inside of a large technology company. And I was fortunate enough to be able to run that for several years. And that gave me a taste of entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship all in the cutting edge technology space, which was a ton of fun, a huge learning curve. And walking out of that, when I was able to finally step away from that project, it gave me first time in years to really pause and reflect. Like, we've gone 100 miles an hour for so long. It's like running a startup. It's busy. It's a grind. And stepping away from that and getting a chance to think back on, okay, well, that was a wild ride. What just happened? What did I learn in those years? What do I take away from that? What do I want to do next? It really started with that reflection and thinking through that. I like to categorize things. I like to create order out of chaos. I like to that's the way my brain works. I just throw a bunch of stuff out there. I'm like, okay, what are the patterns? What are the trends? What can I pull out of this? What is the actionable nugget of wisdom out of this? And that's what I started doing with my own life. And that ended up so coming together in this sort of like bulletized list of like, okay, this whole area, this is all these random things fit under this and all these random things fit under that. And it started shaping up into something that I realized, you know what, this could be a book. That's ultimately what turned into Cake on Tuesday, my book about unlocking corporate innovation, because it was all the lessons that I learned the hard way. And my thought was, can I pay this forward to somebody else who's maybe is not as stubborn to learn it on their own as they're going through it? Like, learn from other people's mistakes and wisdom. Like, not everything in there is a success. There are things that I did that didn't work. There are things that we processes we put in place. Like, okay, that's not good. Let's pivot. But that's a lot of running something. Is you have to be ready to pivot at all times. And I learned a lot about the difference between being on something innovative and leading a team to build something innovative. And when you can be excited and passionate about it, because like, this was my baby, this whole project. I mean, this is from, is there an opportunity we should be looking at, to this is the opportunity, to let's create it this way, to let's build it, like right from day zero, it was my baby. So it was easy for me to be passionate about it. But I had to regularly, across multiple years, convince a lot of people to be passionate about it, whether it's, I want you to fund it, or I want you to allow me to do this. So you want you to allow me to borrow your best people on your team for an indefinite period of time on a project that may or may not be successful. Like, these are hard things to sell. And then you're selling people on it. Like, hey, I know you're wildly successful in your career and very esteemed at what you're currently doing, and yet pick a project. And this project I want you to come work on may or may not might blow up spectacularly, or it might be the next best thing. We have no idea, but I want you to take that ride with me. You have to pass on that vision to them to get them excited about their piece in it and how they could be a part of bringing that to life. So a lot of that book is really focused on that leadership journey and that sort of internal struggle of learning how to communicate things, not for you, but you don't have to sell yourself on this. You're already bought in, but how do you continuously make this message resonate with different audiences? And this is all before you even get to customers, where you can bring it. And that's a whole other thing too. So that led to the book. Then I basically had that question of, oh, all right, I'm still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. What do I want to do next? And I realized I enjoy going on that journey with other people and helping them do something. And I really debated for a while, do I want to do this on my own again and build another startup, build another internal startup, build another venture, or I wanted to take a pause and really help other people on that journey. So the past year-ish, I've been focusing on speaking, writing, workshops, and consulting to help other people who are innovating in their organization and dealing with the unique challenges that come with that space. The fact that usually it's not like I get to put everything on hold and now I'm going to build something new. It's no, I have to still run an entire business while I'm trying to also build another entire business simultaneously, and they both need to be successful. There's a lot of challenges that come with that. So working with leaders who are straddling that line and say, how can you do both of those and have a crap ton of fun doing it, so you end up being energized and excited and not burnt out and stressed. That's what I've been spending my time doing.
Yeah. Well, number one, I love that. And I'd love to hear a little bit about what kind of companies and people you're usually working with. Because I think back to some of my colleagues or peers at Villanova who were trying to do something as simple as get a licensed plan for ChatGPT for their company, and having people who are the heads of innovation at their companies, maybe they were in finance or something else that it isn't very glamorous, but we're having trouble getting the buy-in, even though they're showing these are really good use cases and here's what the processes it'll help with. So are you finding that you're going and working with people who are already open to this, or are people bringing you in to kind of try to, move and push the needle a little bit and get other people to buy in?
Yeah, it depends on whether it's a, hey, we want you to come in and do a workshop. We're open, we're at the front end, we're still exploring, help my staff be more open to this. Then it could be anything's possible. It's a high potential, high energy kind of thing. Sometimes it's a different stage of the process where it's more of a innovation rescue consulting help. We thought this is not working. We don't have money to pivot. What do we do now? So sometimes in those cases, it's really helpful not being an internal person, coming from the outside because you're blessed with the fresh eyes coming into it. And a lot of times when you're in it day to day, it can be really easy to overlook those patterns because they're too close to your face. So when you can step away or you have that luxury of coming in from the outside and looking at it, and again, I told you I love messy things with all this whole bunch of random things that don't seem to coincide. And like, all right, let me see where's the thread? I'm fortunate enough to have that luxury of being able to have a distant view. So I can then help them find that thread and pull it out and say, okay, what about this? Let's look at this. And a lot of times it is a big pivot and that could be hard and that can be scary. It could be hey, I was planning on doing this and going public, but then realize we have to completely change the cell because we need to position the cell or we need to I want us to be this standalone venture, but really it would be make so much more sense doing it inside of a large entity. So now I have to think about, I'm not going to be the CEO, I'm going to be the GM. Like that's a total mind change. Like, do I want to keep doing that? And so sometimes it's those big shifts. So I can spend a lot of time working with somebody on the mental shifts, which is fun and challenging and all the things.
Yeah, I imagine. So what has changed for you since the book? Because obviously you have to do some big book publicity nowadays. You
Yeah.
a lot about yourself, or you have a good agent. But, I'd love to hear, has it influenced people to want to work with you more? Has it opened new doors for you?
I would say it is a great door opener. Books are different than they used to be a long time ago, quite frankly. I mean, it used to be most publishers today will tell you like, don't plan on getting rich on your book. your book is going to open a door. And I think that's totally true. It's a fantastic conversation starter. And I've had plenty of people who have just randomly picked up the book and read it and got something out of it and wrote a really nice review about it. And that's a lovely, wonderful experience. But a lot of times it's more of just, if people just look at it as like, oh, you wrote a book, you must know something in the space. And then it starts a conversation and then you get into it. And then they're like, okay, now let me go back and read the book. So I would say it's a huge door opener for sure. It's been really interesting to having a book titled starting with cake in the business space. As how that's raised a lot of questions. The amount of times I've been asked, like, where did the title come from? I don't think I realized when I made the title how many times I would have to answer that question. The process. But I love the fact that it's different and it's unique and it does raise a question. And that is kind of the embodiment of anything and everything that I do of let's challenge it. Why are we doing things? We might have a perfectly good reason for doing things the way that we're doing. And if we understand that, great, fantastic. But the amount of times we don't know why we do things the way we do, you need to be inquisitive and curious and ask and understand because in knowledge, there's power and truth will set you free. I definitely believe in that adage.
Yeah. And then talk about your podcast.
This is a new thing that I fell into by accident.
Let it know.
This is kind of a spin-off from the book, quite frankly. I had some of the reactions I was getting from the book is just people sharing their stories. And the people that my book was resonating with were people that are like me. The book is very much written. I had multiple people comment that this book, if they know me, they're like, it's like sitting down and having coffee with you. That's how the tone it is. It's my voice. And I meant it to be that way. I didn't want it to be super polished. I didn't want it to be, I'm not super polished. I just wanted to be like having a conversation with me. It's just raw and real and it is what it is. And I find it resonates with other people too, who are maybe a little rougher on the edges. Their professional lives are spent doing things, not talking about the things that they do. And so the talking could be a little bit more rough. So it resonates with that. And I'm finding with the podcast, it's a great platform to elevate those stories. I have a line somewhere on my website for the podcast about I want to elevate the untold stories of the people out there who are really being disruptive and innovative, because they're busy being disruptive and innovative. They don't always have time to write a book or come and do a speaking engagement or lead all these workshops. Like, they're busy doing what they're amazing at. So the podcast, it's just, they're short ones. They're like 20, 25 minutes. It's a short little insight into what do you love about what you're doing? What sets your soul on fire about it? What are these sort of like things you wish people knew about this space or this industry? And then we explore some topics. Like, I love the topic of how culture breeds innovation and how you focus on, this goes back to the human-centric AI, and like putting people first, how you can't get away from it. You can pretend you can, but you really can't. So we dig into some of that too. It's been my very first episode. Macon Stokes, the CEO of Amplifier, he made a LinkedIn post about it afterwards. He's like, "Ooh, Elizabeth got me to talk about culture. I never talk about culture, but it's just a sneaky interviewer." I thought that was so funny because it was great to see somebody he's in the distribution business, and it's not something that he definitely built an amazing culture as a company, but it's not really the thing that he's known for going and talking about. But when you dig into it, it's like, all right, what you're doing there, I see synergies with what other people are doing over here. And there's some truth to it. And that's why you built an amazing, long-lasting company in this type of space. So I get to dig into those fun topics.
Yeah. Yeah. It's obviously one of my favorite platforms.
Yeah. You know a thing or two about podcasting.
What advice would you give to somebody who has ideas, but they're not sure how they're going to be received within their organizations? Like, what are some steps they can take to get other people to, just get a little nugget in to start planting that seed and present their innovations?
I would say don't undervalue the value of a coffee conversation. And that effectively virtual coffee doesn't have to be in person if you're not around the person, but just throwing out an idea, the whole, hey, can I get your advice on something? Hardly ever get to know. And people like to give advice. Everyone gives advice all the time. Getting insight from a lot of different people. And if you have an idea of like, I think we need to do something in this space, I think something here could be good, but you don't know what, you don't know where, you don't know where to start. Just start having that conversation. Throw it out to somebody, first person that you think of, like, oh, they might know something about this. You know what? It doesn't matter. They don't have a perfect deck for it. It's a totally polished idea. You're VC ready to pitch. Like, that's too late anyway. It should just be all right, I got this crazy idea. Would you meet me for 20 minutes for a coffee? I'll buy you a coffee. I'll tell you like my crazy idea and just tell me what you think. And they're going to add something to it. It might be in those 20 minutes, you might get 1 minute of something that makes your idea better. Great. Take that, make it better, and find the next person and do that again. I mean, everything is in the world happens one conversation at a time.
Yeah. Fantastic. Lots more questions, lots more time. We could just keep going off on different topics, but I will link to your podcast and your book and your website in the show notes, and we will have many more conversations. I have no doubt.
I hope
on
so.
Or off recording.
Sounds good.
Yeah. But Elizabeth, I always ask for this podcast, do you have a favorite quote, mantra, verse, poem, family motto, just words that continue to keep you going and inspiring yourself and others?
Yes, I do. I have a Grace Hopper quote, which is right here on my wall next to me. And it is, "A ship in port is safe, but that's not what ships are built for." I love that quote. It kind of embodies everything I want to do in life.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, gosh. Powerful. Amazing. Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining me on Your Brand Amplified. I always love these conversations with you.
Thank you for having me. It's super fun.
Of course. And thank you to everybody who's watching this episode or listening to it on your favorite platform. Be sure to give us a follow, a like, a comment, a 5-star rating, and a review. And check out Elizabeth's podcast, Brand Spanking New, Cake on Tuesday. Same name as the book. With that, I'll be back again very shortly to share another amazing guest story. Thanks for listening or watching to this episode of Your Brand Amplified. Don't forget to leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast listening platform. And if you want to learn more, check us out at yourbandamplified.com.